Happy Thursday and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Rocketeer Minute, where each and every day, Monday through Friday, we go over 1 minute of the greatest adventure movie Walt Disney's ever made, the 1991 Joe Johnston-directed feature, The Rocketeer. I'm one of your hosts, Jim O'Kane of TVDads.com.
And I'm Hal Bryan, an airplane nerd from the Experimental Aircraft Association here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Now, Jim, we have so many great guests on this show, and we always talk to each other. We tell each other, don't geek out too badly. Don't go too full on fanboy. But I'm just beside myself excited to talk to our guest today. This is Craig Hosking. He has worked on just about every movie I have liked in the last 25 years. He's an extraordinary pilot, pioneering videographer. And if you've seen Batman movies, James Bond movies, Jurassic Park, I see his name attached to RoboCop, to one of the Matrix films, anything and everything. If there's some flying in it, Craig Hosking is part of it. And of course, he served as the aerial coordinator for our beloved Rocketeer. Craig, good morning and welcome.
Good morning and thank you. That's a nice introduction.
Well, I'm so excited that you're able to join us for this episode. I know you have a crazy tight schedule. You've got, like I said, I just can't believe your resume. I'm almost flabbergasted. I might just have to sit here and jibber jabber while Jim conducts the show.
Well, thanks, but it's been a wonderful and interesting career. Certainly has.
Oh.
And this movie that we've been talking about for weeks now, The Rocketeer, it's such a great combination. I mean, your talents and skills in a movie about basically aviation. So it must have been exciting being able to talk aircraft and aerobatics and things like that with the folks that were doing these beautiful stunts in a partially CGI movie, but all the plane stuff is real, and it must have been just an exciting time in movie making.
It was indeed, and as Hal mentioned, a lot of my resume, but it's truly one of the very, very top ones in my career as far as the variety of airplanes we got to use, just the plain fun that we had with so many wonderful pilots and so many cool airplanes, and it was indeed one of the highlights of my career.
Yeah, I was wondering, on the minute that we're watching is just the beginning of the air races, and poor Malcolm deciding to get into the Miss Mabel and take off into right into the middle of the air race. When you're plotting out, I'm assuming that this is storyboarded, but I would think that while you're plotting out the direction that the aircraft are taking, how do you do that? Do you just chart it in a notepad? Are you holding up to? I mean, my typical idea of pilots is they start doing things with their hands and waving. We're going to come this way and that way. That's kind of the way you can tell a pilot at a diner. What is the process for getting this going?
Well, the first stage, of course, is the director describes what he envisions in his mind, what the sequences are going to look like, how to make the thing work. Then he'll bring it to me as the art coordinator to design the sequence to match in reality what we can do with aircraft with what he's just imagined in his mind. And I always will try and encourage them to just dream away and don't worry about if it can be done. Don't worry about safety. Don't worry about anything. Just worry about your vision of what the shot works as. And then the experts like me will come along and we'll worry about how to actually execute it. And of course, safety will be the paramount thing for us. But sometimes the director will get too handicapped in his idea because he's worried about things that he doesn't know a lot about. And so we just tell him, tell us what it's going to look like, and we'll figure out how to do it safely. And so we did. And that was this 39 and 40 minutes were a pretty exciting part of the movie.
Were there some unique problems with working with vintage aircraft like this, and just and trying to keep up the speed, or I'm not sure what would be involved in using older aircraft versus modern equipment?
Well, to a lot of your followers and viewers, I guess the simple answer is, yeah. Will the dumb things start when it comes comes to some of the older planes. And so, yeah, that was, as we know with some of those planes, keeping them up. Of course, they were all maintained well. Those were the only planes we brought to the movie were ones that could be dependable. And most of them came with their own mechanics. But yeah, keeping them flying, just getting everybody to start at the same time and going was always a part of it. And of course, in the air race scene that we're talking about, of course, we stage things a little bit. It is Hollywood, and we see in that frame leading up to well, in minute 39, we see that quote air race, and there's some planes with what would of course be dissimilar speeds there. It looks like they're vying for the lead.
Sure.
And nothing would have stayed close to that Traveler mystery ship of Jim Yonkins, but we've got a Great Lakes right on his tail there, looking like it's a good race.
Right. You've got the Ryan STA, and then that's Bill Turner's Miss Los Angeles replica in the back.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And then the announcer in the sequence is Larry Franco, who was the producer of the movie. So he's
really.
Yeah, and so he's a big financial participator, but he had also early in his career worked as a first AD, a first assistant director, and those are the people responsible for organizing the whole day for the whole shoot and each daily activity. And so on those days we had a big audience out there, and Larry is good with handling audiences, and before he was a producer, he was a strong first AD, and so he would be out there handling the crowd and getting them all fired up, and the director Joe just put him in wardrobe and said, "All right, you're going to be the announcer, Larry," and so he was.
Oh, that's great. Now, I've always been curious about so this scene in particular. I've got these 4 airplanes. It's, to the audience, it's racing. To me, it's formation flying. So a couple of things. So they're coming in over the top of or very, very near a crowd. When you're setting up something like this, do you need any particular airspace waivers, anything like that for so for the formation stuff? We're not seeing aerobatics per se.
Well, we do both. Everybody who's in the film becomes a willing participant in the production. And so then we apply a movie manual waiver. Every 2 years as film pilots, we receive these waivers. They allow us to fly aerobatics lower than what the normal altitude would be. They allow us to fly closer to willing participants. And so it's basically like when you go to an air show. Of course, we have the deadline, 500 feet for moderate speed planes, 1,500 feet for the fast ones, as most of your viewers will know. In this case, everybody in the film crew becomes a willing participant, and it'd be just like somebody who's going out there to hold a ribbon pull for an air show performer who's doing a ribbon cut.
Sure.
They're taught, they're educated, they participate willingly, and they realize that they are going to be within those distances. So when we're doing something like this, we'll invoke this privilege by filing a movie manual plan of activities, it's called. And that POA goes into the local FSDO. And on a case like this, where we're going to have a lot of people out there with an air race right over the top of them, and like you said, it's actually formation flying, then we got to add a lot of FA presence out there. And they understood the rules. And Larry each day would announce to all the audience what was going on. And anybody could willingly withdraw if they want. They still would have gotten paid. But of course, everybody wants to be a part of it.
Oh, sure. Very quickly, for those listening who may not be aware, FSDO is Flight Standards District Office. That's which is sort of a local branch of the FAA that you would go and talk to. Now, another sort of quick question about this segment. The airplanes fly over, and the camera goes from the aerial action down to Bigelow, and he's got lines to do, and that timing is just sublime. Do you recall how many takes you had to do with these airplanes flying around?
Well, not a lot. And that's part of what we do as hand flying, as you mentioned, as we design these sequences. Sometimes we'll actually walk through the sequence. And further on here in this movie, the next few minutes, there's this head-on, and we'll talk about that. But we walk through it. Everybody will line up, and we'll get out in the hangar or just out on the ramp, and everybody will walk through where they're going to be, and I'll usually have the director there if he can be, so he can envision how he's going to tilt the camera off of the air race and right down to his audience. And then, as an aerial coordinator, I'm kind of all over the place. But in that particular spot, I was right there at the camera, and I was on the radio to the boys in the air, giving them a little more left. Okay, flatten it out. That's good. Start a right turn. A little tighter left. That kind of a description to bring them right over the mark where the camera wants to see them.
Okay.
Now, this is being filmed. This is being filmed at Santa Maria Airport, which is an active airport. I know that they had to change the pattern so that I think they were coming in right out of the pattern instead of left out of their normal pattern. But did you have a lot of traffic that day that they had to redirect, or?
Well, they set us up. The set was down kind of on the south end of the airfield. On an old diagonal. It was one of those, Santa Maria, for those who don't know, is one of those military airports that was basically a big triangle of extensive, length and width runways so that they could land basically into the wind in just about any condition. And this was one of their diagonal runways that, hadn't been upkept for years, and it was kind of in the dirt state. And so we took that runway, and then we would just keep all our flying south of the main east-west runway, which is the dominant runway they use. And then Tower would just work everybody, like you said, in a pattern to the north. And we've pretty much owned it. The 500-foot line that we did respect was the south end of the main east-west runway. And we just kind of lived in our own little world down there. And they were very, very cooperative.
It's really interesting. Yeah, there was like a little newspaper ad that went out from the production, just thanking, in particular, thanking the local pilots, maybe even a brochure. Thank you, local pilots, for putting up with us and altering your traffic pattern for a couple of weeks and that sort of thing. I didn't want to spoil this from minute 40, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. But one thing I've only noticed fairly recently is in that next minute when the standard J1 takes off, there's what I think is a Cessna 182 just sort of cruising along in the background. And that's about the only anachronism other than that white truck, Jim, that Billy spotted, that you ever really see. Yeah, this crew truck. And it's all of these are blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah. But that's what's fun for us as filmmakers is we try, but every now and then you'll miss one or something lines up so well. And then they'll sometimes actually leave that sequence in there just for the people like you, the others that love to catch us. And we'll just say, let's see how many letters we get on that one.
That's excellent. Well, it only took me about 25 years, but I got it.
You caught us on it. And I didn't even remember that one. Now that you mention it, I do. I had seen it, but,
that's yeah. Funny. Yeah. So Craig, we don't want to bounce around too much, but I wonder if you, since we're fortunate enough to have you now, but we weren't in touch with you at the beginning of this series. Could you talk just a little bit about the GB sequences? And we've got a pretty good understanding of sort of what was the Waco and what was the mock-up on the Bell versus flying the real replica, if you'll allow the term. But I understand you and Steve Hinton both flew the GB replica at the beginning.
Yeah, we did. We the studio actually bought that, and it became the studio's airplane. We knew that plane had a pretty bad reputation for flying badly. And as every GB that's come along, most of them wrecked, and there's a good reason for that. Just super short coupled, poor visibility, and it's a hard plane to fly. When we bought it, and like I said, as aerial coordinator, I wear a lot of hats. And so when we, meaning Disney, bought that airplane, Steve Hinton was going to be the primary pilot, and I was going to be the backup pilot. The other pilots that you see there in the air race flying the standard is Chuck Wentworth. And then we had Steve Hinton, John Maloney, Jim Franklin, and Rick Bricker. And each of those were checked out in each of the specific planes that they were going to be flying. And then as aerial coordinator, like I said, sometimes I'm on the ground. I can help the director best there. Generally, I'm in a helicopter or airplane with a camera system on board. In this case, it was mostly a Jet Ranger with a Tyler mount. But occasionally I'll get in one of the story airplanes. Steve was going to be the primary. I checked out in the GB. After we bought it, I did most of the initial flying of the airplane. There were some substantial modifications we needed to make to that leading linked landing gear. It was highly, highly unstable, darted around horribly on the ground. So after we bought it, I test flew it. Of course, at the time I was current landing pits upside down, so I was pretty quick with my feet on a rudder. And
that is something to see for those that haven't seen it. We'll find maybe a picture, an old video of that. But he's not kidding when he talks about landing a pits upside down with an extra set of landing gear.
So, but with that currency in those kind of planes, that's what put me into the GB first. So I checked out in it. We modified the landing gear. We fixed a few things and made it ready to fly for the movie. But just about every one of the landings, no matter how good we got, we thought that airplane was going off the runway. And then Steve checked out on it as well. But then early, before filming ever began, Steve had a accident in one of the museum's airplanes that was going to be in the show. It had an engine failure right after takeoff, and not badly, but Steve hurt himself a bit. And so that made me the primary pilot for the GB, and I brought in another pilot named Harry House to do the camera work from the helicopter. So basically, for most of the movie, every time the GB flew, it was me flying it. And then Steve was healing it and getting better, and was able to join us for some of the film, but certainly not in a position to want to fly that GB.
Now, did you ever fly that modified Waco with the GB rear section, or was that Jimmy Franklin?
I did all the flying in that. Yeah.
Oh, you did all the flying in that. Okay.
Yeah, everything with the GB Waco, I did the flying on. We had a camera mounted in there. Looking back at the mock-up back half of that Waco with the actor in it.
Was that your idea to modify the back of the Waco like that?
Yes, yeah, I've done that a couple of times on a few movies.
That was absolutely brilliant. I didn't for years. I didn't know how that was done, but that was brilliant.
We did a similar thing on a feature coming up this summer, just in another month. That's called Dunkirk. And everybody, I hear from both your reactions. All of us who are in the lovers of aviation know about Dunkirk coming up. But we used a similar trick in that movie, and I'll let you try and catch us on it. And maybe we'll do this again on Dunkirk.
Oh man, I would love to. Gosh, those early Mark Spitfires in just in the trailer, you almost weep when you see those airplanes. They're just gorgeous. So I can't wait.
Yeah.
And one of our frequent guests is Billy Campbell, the Rocketeer himself, and he talked about trying to overcome his terrible fear of flying, and also he mentioned that he had slight claustrophobia. So the combination of being jammed in the back of a Waco while doing maneuvers and having to act his lines must have been his worst nightmare. But it seemed like he got through it all right.
Well,
in terms of
Bill and I joked about that all these years later, of the scene where he punches through the canopy with the oil on the windshield. He said, "I wasn't acting, man. I was really scared."
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So, a couple other things I wanted to call out, or at least one thing in particular. I just discovered, I didn't realize this when I was reacquainting myself with your resume. And forgive me, Jim, a little bit far afield here, but Craig, you did cinematography on what I think maybe arguably is some of the most beautiful flying footage ever of any film. And anybody who comes to me wants to know a good flying movie. So I point them toward a French film, Les Chevaliers du Ciel, or the Sky Fighters. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't even have a question about it. I just want to make sure that anybody out there listening who wants to see some absolutely jaw-dropping aerial footage that you did in cooperation with the French Air Force and the Mirage 2000s and things, definitely go check out Sky Fighters. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, that was epic. We had a Learjet with the camera system over in an airbase in French called Orange, or it's just spelled orange if people look it up. It's near Avignon, and we were there for about a month running around with that Airbus and the Mirage fighters and the full Patrol de France. It was a pretty big fun project.
That was absolutely jaw dropping. One other little trivia question for you here. And that is, there's a scene or two in this film around this sequence where we see a chalkboard with pilots' names and speeds and things written next to them. And your name is written there, Hosking, and it looks to me like somebody has added an S. Is that an inside joke, or do you remember anything about why that was?
Everybody just adds the S to the end of my name. Even today, people want to make me Hoskings, and there's no S there. And so, no, that was just whoever wrote that board up was kind of joking around, because some of it was the real pilot.
Sure.
Gosh, I've got to review that minute of the movie. But yeah, there were several that were real names, and others were like names of the producer or the writer or funny things like that they put up there.
That's great.
I'm just sitting here watching. I keep watching the minute.
I know.
It's amazing how you just get pulled into this film, and do you frequently watch your own? I mean, you have so many movies. I would imagine that you bump into them all the time. But do you frequently wind up watching older movies to get ideas of how things were approached back then, or just reviewing things, or?
Not so much. Generally, it's just done with the kind of ideas that come in the moment. Try not to go back to rehashing old things, old sequences, and so. Sometimes I like to have that just a blank canvas in my brain when I read a script or we start talking with a director. So I don't often refer to that. But of course, the nature of aerial filming takes us back to tricks we've played before.
As cameras and other video equipment have gotten smaller, and we're approaching the newer technologies like drones and automated flight, how has that changed your work? Have you come to use drones more, or are you using drones in your aerial work?
Well, they're a tool that kind of bridges a gap for us occasionally. They'll fit in where we can't reach with our longer cranes, where they put a techno crane, which is a stabilized crane that will have the camera on a remote controlled head, and they can reach in and over things. And then the helicopters. But there is a space in there for drones. And yeah, people use them a lot. They'll try and get up and lower and closer to where normally you might start seeing rotor wash on a helicopter. And so people are using them. Not a major impact on our business, hasn't really altered it much. They came along with a lot of excitement and fanfare to Hollywood a few years ago, kind of settled into now just being another tool, just like a techno crane or a dolly or whatever a director and his DP might choose to use to move the camera.
I would imagine that even though that CGI is becoming a more a technology that's been relied on more and more in movies as they're doing things, you're still getting a lot of work for doing background plates and things like that. Is that would you say that's a common thing?
Sure. Yeah, we you see a variety of anything and a director's approach to it. You get into a Michael Bay type of Transformers movie, and going in, it's all going to be a big computer visual effect. Star Wars, those kind of things. And then you have the purists who, even though strangely enough, our director on Rocketeer, Joe Johnson, came from ILM and came from the digital modification kind of world, he was very, very much about shooting it for real, as much as we could do for real. And hence the cockpit on the back of the Waco that Billy Campbell flew. And a lot of directors would just say, oh, we'll shoot that on a green screen stage, go shoot the backgrounds for it. But Joe, being a digital guy, still chose to shoot it real. So we see that a lot too.
Yeah, it's still, here we're 25 years on, and it's still just breathtaking watching this movie. I never tire of seeing the action, even though that it's set up to look these ways and stuff. It's just still it's breathtaking, and I think Hal would agree on.
Oh, absolutely.
The rewatchability of it all is stunning. It looks like everybody in the cast and crew seemed to have a very good time on this movie. From what we've been hearing, everybody had a great time. I mean, this was like being at a month-long air show.
Exactly, and it was with people we had all chosen we wanted to be with. Jim Arnett, the stunt coordinator that was handling the ground stunts and activity, was a good friend of mine, and it was a ton of fun. There was a lot of pranks at the hotel, and somebody ended up with a Coke machine in their hotel room. And a lot of those kind of things went on amongst all the crew. In fact, the producer, Ian Bryce, Of course, any producer or good production manager's job is to watch the budget. And Ian is a wiry guy. And we mentioned Michael Bay. Ian went on to produce and still does for Michael, but he was the producer on this show. And Jim Arnett and I are both pretty big guys, and just the camaraderie on the crew. Usually there is a bit of animosity between the producer and the financial guys who don't want to give us what we need financially, but Ian budgeted the movie well, and so it was just a good feel. But we were Jim and I were joking with Ian one day about being so cheap. Jim grabbed him by one shoulder of his shirt and his legs, and I grabbed him by the other, and we literally picked him up and shook him, and not a penny more came out of his pocket. And so that was the kind of fun we had on the movie.
That's fantastic.
It looks like you had great. I mean, I would assume that the weather there was pretty mild, but it looks like you didn't have any weather days. Were there generally clear skies the whole time you were shooting?
Yeah, you're taking a long memory back, but I don't remember having any weather days. I don't remember losing much at all there. Yeah.
And about how long would you have been out at Santa Maria?
Again, kid, whatever I say is going to be wrong because it's just too many years ago. But I think we were there for probably a month, 3 to 4 weeks, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you involved at all in planning the structures that were being built, like the location of the hangars and stuff, or where you needed things for the shot, or was that mostly in Joe's purview?
Well, we're certainly in harmony with us. When you're on this big of an aerial movie, I had an office right there at Disney, right by everybody else's, for about 6 weeks during prep. And yeah, that's exactly part of what we would do is a production designer who designs the sets and actually has them built would design things, and we would go up to location and scout and figure out where the sun's going to be if we're looking back in this direction, and how the planes are going to be lit, and how the set would be lit. And so yeah, I was heavily involved with placement of things. So we had grandstands in the right area where we most likely would have our prevailing wind to fly the straightaway, as well as the light of it all. And so yeah, it was a big deal.
I'm really floored by how substantial the construction was on these. I mean, that Bigelow hangar still stands as the Santa Maria Air Museum, and it's a surprisingly sturdy structure for what would have been a 1 or 2 month use in the production. So it's pretty impressive. Of course, they're also being used at the same time as sets, interior sets that they would shoot inside and outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it surprised me a lot. But wow, this is a beautiful minute, and we're just beginning to get into the action. But why don't we pick some of that up tomorrow here on our show as we finish out the week? Craig, if you we'll check back with you here for folks needing to leave some more messages here on our social media. We're available in a bunch of different places. You can find us on Twitter, Rocketeer Minute. You can find us at Facebook, facebook.com/Rocketeer Minute. Also at the big site, rocketeerminute.com, where you can catch up on previous episode, pick up some cool swag, maybe get a copy of The Rocketeer on Blu-ray, which is out there. Amazon will be happy to sell you one, and it'll make Disney very happy, I'm sure. So check those out. But join us here tomorrow as we continue our discussion of high flying with Craig. So until next time, over and out.